Mineral Resources and Energy Ministry has welcomed the Integrated Resource Plan 2019 approved by Cabinet this week. Minister Gwede Mantashe said the plan will restore much-needed certainty on the country's energy mix. He also announced plans for 2 additional small nuclear plants and said coal would remain a large part of the country's energy mix. The release of the IRP comes as Eskom announced that it would reinstate Stage 2 load shedding from midday to 11 o'clock tonight.
16 power stations in South Africa are coal-generated power stations. And they're not going to be decommissioned in the next 2 years or 5 years. They're going to be around for a long time, but there are those that are going to be decommissioned because they have come to the end of their life. But we're going to still have a big volume of electricity generation from coal. And therefore, we are cautioning people who say coal is coming to an end. We have 16 power stations that are coal generated. That is the reality that we face today as we sit here. And therefore, coal is going to continue playing a significant role. But we say to new investors on coal, please move towards efficient coal technology. That is high efficiency and low emissions, underground coal gasification, and development of carbon capture and deposit. To enable us to continue using our coal resources in an environmental responsible way.
Well, for more on this story, we cross to our reporter Mbalenhle Mthethwa, who's standing by for us in Pretoria. Good afternoon, Mbalenhle. Obviously, the minister says coal is here to stay, at least in the South African context. Tell us more.
Yes, indeed. We heard the minister talking about how coal is still going to form a large part of the country's energy mix. He mentioned that it was going to form 59% of the energy mix, and saying that the country has 16 coal-powered power stations that will not be decommissioned. He used the example of a certain town in Mpumalanga called Hendrina, and he said that if the department was to decommission some of these power stations, that town would turn into a ghost town, talking about how a lot of the people who work in that town and the economic activity in that town is basically built around the Eskom power station there, as well as the Optimum mine that is in the area. So those were the unintended consequences that he warned South Africans of in the event that South Africa were to decommission some of the country's coal-powered power stations. He also talked about the importance of energy to the economy, and he welcomed basically this newly approved IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan, saying that it does form a part of the economy, and it forms a very integral part of Minister Mbowene's economic strategy plan to revive the economy and add at least 2.3% to the country's ailing economy. He also spoke about nuclear. He touched on nuclear, and he spoke about how Koeberg was going to be extended by the lifespan of Koeberg was going to be extended by an additional 10 years. He also talked about how the country was going to build additional nuclear plants, but at a pace and at a rate and a capacity that the country and the economy can afford. We know that nuclear has been a point of contention in the past, given that the country could not afford a very big nuclear build project, and he basically allayed fears in that regard.
Nuclear, Mbalenhle, what was he saying in terms of capacity? You talk about smaller plants. How small?
Okay, so at this stage, we understand that the economy is not growing sufficiently and at a rate at which it can afford to build a very big nuclear plant. He talked about how, yes, indeed, nuclear is viewed as a clean source of energy. However, the country cannot afford to do that at a big scale right now. However, they will be going ahead and building very small scale and at a rate that the economy can afford.
So, Mbalenhle, regardless of who runs our energy systems, whether it's Eskom or private sector or whatever it is, what was the minister saying around governance? Because due to a lack of governance at Eskom, which provides us 95% of South Africa's electricity needs, we've had a lot of trouble, and hence we're having load shedding as it is.
Okay. So he talked about governance, he touched on governance, which is a very important issue given the things that have, the evidence that we've heard coming out of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, where witnesses have come in and they have spoken about how governance was weakened and how money was siphoned out of these SOEs, which have left them in a very unfortunate position, financial position, where some of them have not been able to honor pay salaries rather to their employees. He talked about how they would be moving forward with regards to appointing board members to some of these SOEs and appointing permanent CEOs. He particularly spoke about one company that they are going to be renewing a CEO for, appointing a CEO for rather, and that is the Central Energy Fund. And he said that they will be doing that as soon as next week. When he was asked about Eskom, he said that, it does not fall under his department, and that, appointing a CEO, a permanent CEO at Eskom was a question that should have been asked, or should have been asked to, a question that should be directed at Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, instead. But basically, he talked about governance and its importance, and he said that having a permanent CEO at SOEs as well as other departments, government institutions, would help with regards to restoring confidence at these SOEs as well as good governance.
One last thing, Mbalenhle, in terms of the renewable energies, now we're having this problem of load shedding. There's been a lot of pressure for perhaps then for the government to move speedily to get more renewable energy players, independent power producers on board, so that we know when we have these power failures, at least they can step in and provide energy. Did he speak to that at all?
Yes, indeed. He spoke about the recent load shedding in general, and he said that, load shedding is evidence and proof that there are gaps in the energy supply, and that there is that Eskom does need some form of assistance. But he also spoke about Eskom also participating and also providing renewable energy. He spoke about some of the resources that the country has, which will help with regards to storing energy, and he said this would go a long way with regards to supplying energy in far-flung areas. And so he said that Eskom has already started working towards a certain storage facility where that will enable them to store energy, and in the event that they are unable to produce sufficient energy, they are able to tap into their reserves and their storage reserves.
Thanks very much, Mbalenhle, for your report. That was Mbalenhle Mthethwa reporting from the minister, where he was, Gwede Mantashe, pardon me, the Department of Mineral Energy department, basically giving us an overview of the IRP, that's the new energy plan.